Okay guys, it's time to talk about the Fiendsmith situation, since apparently it is bad. We don't have the Lacrima, and this actually changes some things up here. The Fiendsmith engine definitely feels worse than it needs to. We are missing the Lacrima, we have the Engraver at 2, we have the Necro-Equip Princess not in the game, and also the Aerial Eater. If you want to play the best version of, for example, Snake Eyes, I would say go ahead and play Snake Eyes Azamina. Definitely way better. The Azamina engine is full, it's powerful, better than the Fiendsmith stuff at the moment, unfortunately. So I want to explain to you where the difference lies here, because there is a difference in some situations, and then in some it doesn't really make a difference. Where it doesn't really make the biggest difference is if you start with your Fiendsmith Engraver. And let me quickly show you why this basically works. We go Fiendsmith Engraver into the Tract, then we can go Tract. So the problem with all of this is a body problem, right? We are missing bodies, meaning monsters on the board that we can make our plays with. So now our Lurry returns here, and as I already said, if we start with the Engraver, this actually works. We can now go into the Fiendsmith Requiem here. Then we can send away, and now we have what is basically 2 engravers. And this is what we need, right? With 2 engravers we can make something work. We have the 1 engraver on the field, and then the other one that can still shuffle back from the graveyard. So this works. In the other scenario we would have the engraver from the graveyard and then the Lacrima, which also would work because we could still go into our sequence. So what we would do here is we would go Engraver, shuffle back the Lurry, and from here on out you can basically do what you like to do with your Fiendsmith plays. You could go into a Caesar from here if you wanted to just be safe from nip basically, but you can also go ahead and say, okay, I want to go deeper into the Fiendsmith line, which would mean that you go for the sequence here. And now you can decide, maybe you want to get access to your Snake Eye Ash or maybe your Jubel starter. This you can do if you start with the Engraver, since what you can do now, as you can see, we have triple Fiendsmith, triple Fiends in the graveyard, which means you can now activate the Fiendsmith sequence. You can fusion summon into the Desiree if you want, this works. You can also fusion summon into the Lacrima, since you would shuffle back one of the Engraver and the Requiem, and then there's still an Engraver in the graveyard to be revived in order for you to go into your Beatrice combo. All of this works. We can just, for example, quickly make it here so you can go into your end boss monster. This works, but you can also just go ahead and make your Lacrima here. Just special the Lacrima. Then we are going to special the Fiendsmith Engraver, and we are special summoning it. So this works. This is no problem here. And then from here on out, you can go into your Beatrice. And you can send, in this case we will send, I have some Samsara the Lotus in the deck, I think, which would be using the Jubel stuff. That's right. And from here on out you could go into the Muckraker from the Underworld, reviving the Jubel by discarding 1, but you can also do it with the Snake Eye Ash. You can also send the Snake Eye Ash to the graveyard and revive the Snake Eye Ash with the Promethean Princess. It's the same thing, works the same. So the thing is that with a fully operating Fiendsmith engine, with the start of the Engraver, all of this works. And this is the important thing, all of this works without having to invest another additional card. But now let's look at the situation, or the situations, which are getting worse because we don't have the Lacrima. So in this case, let's assume we did not have the Fiendsmith Engraver in the hand. This is the same starting hand as before. Let's say we are entering the Fiendsmith engine, as you will oftentimes do, since we only have 2 engravers, through the Moon of the Closed Heaven. So we are now establishing 2 bodies. Doesn't really matter that we have the Snake Eye stuff here. This is not what I want to show you. And then you will, in a lot of decks, have the ability, and this is one of the strong points of Fiendsmith, to go into the Moon of the Closed Heaven. Any 2 effect monster bodies can go into Moon, which can then go into the Fiendsmith engine. But here is where you actually have a little bit of a problem, since if we now go into the Requiem here, and then we are going to play the Requiem to send the Fiendsmith Engraver from our deck to the field, or this one was from our hand, doesn't really matter though, we would have sent it anyway. Then here is the point at which the problem occurs, right? So if this would be a Lacrima here, we could, or we would have sent the Fiendsmith Engraver to the graveyard, which then we would have the Fiendsmith Engraver in the graveyard here, which we could now revive, giving us 2 bodies, and 2 bodies is exactly what we need, 2 body problem, in order to go into Fiendsmith sequence. But now we are stuck with our 1 Fiendsmith Engraver, which means that at this point we have the problem that we need to invest an additional body outside of the Fiendsmith combo to go into sequence. I mean, if you do it, then this still works, since you also can get your Fiendsmith Engraver back to the hand via the Lacrima and thereby gonna generate an additional body. But as you can see right here, if we have another summon not left, then we can't go further from here. Then you need another summon or another body. And this is the same situation if you start with the Fiendsmith Tract. And this I will also show you so that you understand how this is meant. Okay, so let's look at the last situation that could occur where you open your Fiendsmith Tract. And this is the same problem because you will add your Lurry to the hand here. This is actually a bit worse, since with the other combo we just saw with the Moon, we actually have the ability via our Lacrima to add back our Engraver from the graveyard to the hand, and then we can still do this what you just saw here, so we can still make an additional body. That's nice. But here we can't, since we have started with the Lurry play. Obviously, you are going into your Requiem now, and then once again we are going into the Fiendsmith Engraver. And once again, at this point, if we would have the Lacrima here, we would have Lacrima on the field, dumping a Fiendsmith Engraver to the grave that we could now special summon, and so the engine would be self-sufficient because now you could go into your Fiendsmith sequence. Obviously, the fact that we don't have the Necroquip Princess, which is not in this deck right now, but is the level 6 that you can make with your Lacrima and with your Requiem, makes it a bit worse, because then you can't just go overlay into a rank 6, but it doesn't really matter. So at this point, what you will need here is an additional summon, like for example the Samsara Lotus, an additional body, and now our Fiendsmith stuff is live once again, right? So what we can do now is go into the sequence once again, but unfortunately there's another problem right here, because now we have 3 light fiends in our graveyard, and if we now want to use the effect of our Fiendsmith Engraver, which is definitely something that we might want to do because this is an additional body on the field, we should think twice about this, because if we do this, then we need to shuffle back one of the other light fiends, which means that we then can no longer go into our end boss monster, since we need 3 light fiends for the end boss monster. So we are not only needing to invest an additional body into this even working, but we can also not use our Fiendsmith Engraver in this situation because we can't continue from there. So obviously in this situation you could go ahead and go Fiendsmith sequence, you could fuse into your end boss monster if you wanted to, since we have 3 light fiends. You could also fuse into your Lacrimosa here, which is this card, and then you can shuffle back the Fiendsmith Requiem and the Lurry in order to revive the Engraver. Then we have 2 level 6s, and like I showed you before, then you could go into the Beatrice or into your DD Wave King. But as I already said, the effect of the Engraver cannot be used here, because let's try to use it. We are shuffling back the, the Lurry, it doesn't really matter. And then we are getting this to the board here, and let's say that we now want to use this fusion summon here. We obviously want to use this body for something useful, so let's assume we are using this as a discard for the Diabellstar, because we need to get it back in the graveyard, otherwise why have we summoned it? So once again it's back in the graveyard, but at this point we have the situation that now we cannot use the sequence at all, because as you can see right here, we cannot fusion summon into our Desiree, but we can also not fusion summon into our Lacrima, because let's try to do this. We are fusioning in our Lacrima, the level 6 guy, which normally could revive our Fiendsmith Engraver, but Fiendsmith Engraver is now gone because we needed to shuffle it back with the sequence. So this is really, really bad. Sometimes it can make sense if you have the Tract to use the Tract, especially if you have another Fiendsmith Engraver in the hand, then it can actually make sense to use Tract to fusion summon, for example, for the Lacrima. This can be quite nice, but this needs you to have the other Fiendsmith Engraver in the hand. And the solution for this is, don't get me wrong here, the engine is still good, but you need to understand how differently this operates now. You need to understand that if you open with your Tract or with your Moon of the Closed Heaven, you will need an additional body in order to go into sequence, and then if you only have one Fiendsmith Engraver in the graveyard at that point, you will have to decide on what you want to do with that. You can go into your end boss monster, you can also go into your Lacrima, and then into your Beatrice to get access to, for example, the Snake Eye Ash or the Samsara Lotus in Jubel, or Memento Goblin in Memento. But keep in mind that you cannot use Fiendsmith Engraver's effect in the graveyard. And if you go Fiendsmith in the starting hand, Fiendsmith Engraver, then it's fine, because then the engine is still self-sufficient. It can work with itself and end up on the boss monster. This is what you need to understand, and this is how it is different, because the Lacrima in these other two scenarios, the Moon scenario and the Tract scenario, would have provided us with an additional body, which is a very, very important body. This is not only an additional body on the field that we can use for our sequence that we are missing right now, as I have showed you, but this is also an additional body in the graveyard, which is exactly the body we are missing to do the plays afterwards, which is why we ended up on this Fiendsmith Lacrima not being able to resummon the Engraver. Because if there was a Lacrima in the grave, we could have shuffled back the Lacrima and the Engraver would still be in this grave, but there is no Lacrima, so we couldn't. And this is how the engine is worse. You just have to understand what this means and how to effectively use this engine. This obviously also means that some of the combo lines that I, for example, have showed you do not work. I will update them throughout the next days, but just note here that all of the decks that wanted to use Fiendsmith are definitely worse off now. This is definitely true. But yeah, this is the Fiendsmith situation as it currently stands. DK had said that it will come pretty soon, probably. Don't know what this means. Maybe in the next pack, maybe even before. I don't know. We will see. A very important card, obviously. It doesn't really matter in terms of ultra rare. This will probably be an ultra rare then, but this is only a one-off, so it doesn't really matter. So no Konami making money shenanigans going on there, I guess. But you can let me know in the comments what you think of this situation. Have you tried the Fiendsmith engine out and also noticed that it's not that strong? Let me know in the comments. And yeah, just to update you on the Fiendsmith situation. If you like the videos I'm doing, please consider subscribing, hitting a thumbs up and the notification bell. Also to not miss out on more of these combo videos coming over the next days.